first place I've discovered hearts and minds was used was in 1854 in the Northwest Frontier by a British colonial officer who was wanting to do better work than had been done in the Northwest Frontier before. My point about ancient ethnic hatreds was that it was the way that it was framed at the time by the Tory government in order to not get involved in military intervention in a situation where a number of journalists were on the ground and thought that there was terrible things happening here, and this was, you know, quite close to Europe, and perhaps something should be done in inverted commas. Journalists who saw and knew people in Sarajevo who didn't even know whether their parents were Muslim or Serbian, because that was the experience of an urban, sophisticated society where they just had the Winter Olympics a couple of years before. This was a place that saw itself as an international city. I do remember a piece by Alan very early on in the war saying this is not about Serbs and Bosnians, this is about cowboys and citizens. This is about people from the countryside and people from the towns. But ancient ethnic hatreds, as framed by the politicians at the time, was not a way that actually understood what was happening on the ground. Yes, once Karadzic had started it all, once you've got people going, Ed Valiani's book is the best on this, saying that it was actually quite hard to get people to kill their neighbours, but once you got them to begin to kill their neighbours, then they could carry on doing it. So, but Douglas Hurd standing back and saying these are ancient ethnic hatreds actually wasn't a useful summation of what was happening at the time. It was an excuse against understanding. So that and journalists who went in on the ground may have been simplistic by saying something must be done, inverted commas, but
so that we end up friends, David, and I promise that won't be a long way. I went exactly this point. I think the years 1994 or 5. I went to see Douglas Hurd. I just come back from Sarajevo, in fact, with Alan. And I said to Douglas, you've got to intervene, you've got to intervene. He made exactly this point. He said, no, these people have always fought each other. They've always fought each other. The best thing is, and these are his words, to build a fire break round it and let it burn itself out. And I said to him, Douglas, are you so historically illiterate that you don't realise that the people who have always fought each other for the last 1,000 years and killed each other in innumerable quantities is us Europeans? And if we could find a way to live together, how dare you say that these people cannot? We should. This was a piece of historical determinism of a terrifying sort. So I just want to back you up.
But this is he echoed Bismarck, which is the Bosnia, the Balkans are not worth the bones of a single Pomeranian grenadier. But I agree absolutely with Peter's point that we don't report. And back to the reporting of these things, we don't report enough from how it looks on the ground. I think that's the biggest failing of the Western press in terms of understanding.
There is a reason for that. I mean,
the reason for that is because we're always talking to NGOs.
No, that's one issue. But the other is that people are being killed.
Yeah.
I mean, if Shabab in Somalia had said, "Hey guys, come and report from our side," or the Taliban had said, any foreign report is welcome, there would have been a very different coverage of the whole war in Afghanistan.
Well, I did say.
Yeah, but you didn't go in a summer, you didn't cozy up to a summer, you went embedded, to put it that way. I mean, if there had been you guys can be embedded or in Iraq.
But I want to take up on
being killed is a real disincentive.
Yeah, it's a real disincentive. It spoils your whole afternoon, exactly. But I kind of want to take up on Michela's point, which is that there are two things here. One of which is that the people who cover failing states, it's very difficult to cover failing states. We're self-selecting. Often we go in because we actually care about, or we're party-proof, one way or another, or our organisation is party-proof. We try as much as we can to try and understand what the underlying motivations are. But I've become convinced over the last 13 years there is no such thing as kind of balanced journalism. And I actually think balanced journalism is wrong. I actually think you should be able to kind of be passionate about what you think is wrong, but you should also be able to understand the fact that there is the fact that the way that you become embedded in an idea of what one group of people is suffering. Because you do, it's inevitable. Anyone who's covered the Middle East, and I'm looking at Jeremy here, as well as myself, as well as probably other people in the room, in the end, it becomes very, very difficult to write about places that are complex without actually coming to some kind of an idea of what you feel is the reality of it. And I think that one of the problems of failed states is that you become drawn into those arguments, whether it's Sudan, whether it's Burundi, whether it's Rwanda, which Lindsey covered so magnificently. You become sort of burned up with a sense of the injustice of what's going on. And in a way, it becomes very difficult to do independent journalism. Now, I don't know whether that experience, that personal experience as an individual, necessarily helps our understanding of failed states, because we see one thing in one very tight, blocked off frame of often extreme violence, and we make a decision, and often it's a pretty right decision. But I think I think that we mistake the idea that what we're seeing in the humanitarian crisis is absolutely defining, and I think that is the one thing that over the years that I've come to understand is that actually things go far beyond that, and actually it takes so much effort to understand why family A hates family B, community A hates family B. I mean, but beyond the obvious, and I think that's where the failure is, because we don't give enough time to trying to understand out things exactly outside of the framework of a humanitarian crisis, in terms of what lies beneath. And I think for journalists it's extremely difficult to strip off that layer. I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I mean, Lindsey is shaking her head slightly. So why can't?
Yes. I'm Lindsey Hilsum. Can I just say two things? First is that we are broadcasting or writing for an audience.
Yeah.
Right. And we are writing for an audience that actually is not necessarily that interested in all the different rebel groups with their different acronyms in Darfur. There's the German, there's the SLA, and there's the SLA Mini Manawi, and all these kind of stuff. Now, I may get very, very fascinated by that because I'm that kind of girl, but most people are not going to be fascinated by that. And so you do have to find a paradigm which people can be interested in and which gives them some information. And the second thing is that I think that just as Lord Ashdown may disagree with me here, just as sort of many people tend to fight the last war, you learn lessons from the last war and then you use those techniques on the next one. I think that in our narratives of failed states we do that. So we're all obsessed with ethnic conflict because that's what we have, this generation of journalists has come up with. Well actually, at the moment I think the issue is organised crime, and I think that organised crime is a huge issue and a driver of the failing of failed states. We find
hang on, you can't separate the two.
Yeah, okay, I agree that you can't separate it. But I think that we are failing to look at that dynamic because we became involved in the previous dynamic of trying to understand all the ethnic groups, trying to understand all the different rebel groups, and we missed out this one. And so that's, I think, part of our failure.